Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are here to talk about inclusive pedagogy online, faculty development, and effective strategies. We're going to start off with introductions. Katherine, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. Great to see everyone here today. My name is Katherine McAlvage. I am one of the assistant directors in the course development and training unit at Ecampus, and I also teach in the graduate school.
And I am Jen Myers. I'm an instructor in sustainability, and I'm an Ecampus research fellow.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nadia Jaramillo Cherrez, an instructional design specialist at Ecampus. Welcome to our session.
Hi folks, my name is Deanna Lloyd. I'm an instructor in the horticulture department and also the sustainability double degree program. I am also an eCampus research unit fellow. So to get started, you have at least a slight sense of who we are now, and we would love to hear a bit about who you all are, so we know who's in the room, and so we can tailor our Q&A responses to our audience. So we have shared a Jamboard link in the chat, and we ask that you go to slide 2 and create a sticky note, type your name, and then place it under the category that best fits your role. Once you've done that, please head to slide 3, and in a few words, share what inclusive teaching means to you. And we will be using this Jamboard again, so please keep it open on a separate tab. And if you need directions on how to actually create those sticky notes to add, they're provided on slide 1. So also sometimes folks are uncertain how to navigate between slides, but you can see that on the slide we're sharing here, there's a little navigation icon, and that will appear at the top of the Jamboard, and you can use those arrows to navigate between slides. And we'll give you about 1.5 to 2 minutes here to do that. So if you could both write your name and highlight your role, and then also share in a few words what inclusive teaching means to you. Wow, seeing a lot of instructional designers coming in there. It's kind of fun. Everybody drops into the academic technology and then moves forth from there. And after you get your name and your role highlighted, if you can go to the next slide and in a few words, write what inclusive teaching means to you. So you can do that again with sticky notes. Right, I'm seeing considering all learners, student-centered, universally designed, mix of culturally responsive and engaged instruction, accessibility, accessible, students. This is wonderful to see. Thanks, folks. Keep bringing them if you have more words to share.
Okay, and feel free to keep posting. I'm going to just jump over back to the slides and start providing a little bit of an overview. It's going to be fairly high level of a research project that the four of us are working on. It's really about professional development around inclusive online teaching strategies and which strategies work best in an asynchronous online environment. So the first stage in our project was we began it with a survey to all of our Oregon State Ecampus faculty in December 2019, which helped us to understand how much value faculty place on various inclusive teaching approaches and how much confidence they have in applying those approaches. Responses to that survey were anonymous. The survey results provided us valuable insight for what content should be included in a workshop on this topic, and highlighted that we really needed a workshop specifically around inclusive teaching approaches in asynchronous online courses as opposed to other modalities. All eCampus faculty were then invited to begin participating in our Inclusive Teaching Online, or ITO, workshop. In this workshop, we have curated evidence-based practices that have been shown to work online and adapted some other strategies that have not yet been studied in depth in an online environment. We have 3 faculty cohorts that have completed so far. Participants are invited to participate in our research study at the beginning of the workshop, but they can participate fully without taking part in the research as well. Of our consenting faculty participants, we are tracking 2 groups during and after the workshop that we'll be talking about today. One is all consenting research participants, so across all disciplines teaching online. And the second group is consenting research participants who are DPD faculty. So at Oregon State, our general education curriculum includes a category of courses called Difference, Power, and Discrimination, or DPD. All bachelor degree seeking students must take a DPD course. So as you might imagine by the name of this category, these courses address institutionalized systems of inequity and privilege in the US, and they can be particularly challenging for our faculty to teach asynchronously online. Next slide. So participation in ITO has been significantly higher than our other voluntary eCampus faculty workshops. Nadia and I co-facilitate these workshops because they require fairly intensive facilitation, particularly because we try to model the strategies that we're promoting. Considering the many challenges that COVID has posed for our faculty in this past year, we're really proud of how many faculty have fully completed. One thing I wanted to note too is that the workshop addresses strategies that are applicable across all disciplines, from STEM fields to education, humanities, business, and beyond. We've had participants from 9 out of the 11 academic colleges at OSU, and the remaining 2 colleges are professional programs that don't have eCampus courses. So we're really seeing a broad participation from our online faculty. Next slide. This workshop was built to support 2 audiences. One, faculty instructors and graduate teaching assistants who did design the online course that they go on to teach. And then also folks who did not design their online course and may in fact have restrictions in changing course design and course materials in the online version. So as such, you'll see in a moment that the themes of each module in this workshop are more weighted toward facilitation related aspects of online course delivery, or in other words, teaching strategies that can be put into play just before and during the course. Next slide. So ITO is a 4-week workshop with 1 module per week. Modules 1 and 2 provide a lot of opportunities for participants to self-reflect and build awareness. And then modules 3 and 4 cover specific evidence-based inclusive teaching strategies and ask faculty to start working toward possible applications. Next slide. So here we've provided some additional information about topics and strategies that are covered in those first 2 modules. As we get started with faculty, they explore impacts of their own identities on their online teaching and reflect on how and where they present themselves to their students. Then they're introduced to different cultural constructs of teaching and learning that instructors and students bring into classrooms, how online students specifically encounter barriers to their success. And we talk about the principles of inclusive excellence from the Association of American Colleges and Universities, or AAC&U. Next slide. In Module 3, we cover syllabus statements, which are a faculty's personal philosophy about diversity and inclusion to set the tone for the course, equitable course policies, adding supplemental or refresher material to support student review and activate prior knowledge, how and when to refer OSU students to resources available to them, midterm faculty outreach to struggling students or students who are disengaged, transparent assignment prompts, and actionable feedback. As you can see, it's a pretty dense module. We're trying to present a lot of very practical strategies. And then in Module 4, we focus entirely on facilitating asynchronous online discussions, since we know this is a particularly acute challenge for eCampus faculty. We first discussed distinguishing between different purposes for using discussion boards in the LMS, namely, are we doing debates, discussions, or dialogues, and how to align discussion participation requirements and grading with those purposes. We also adapted a cross-cultural communication framework for use in the online threaded discussion format, and faculty try this framework out in a case study of a problematic student post and then discuss how it worked out. The workshop is bookended by a pre-survey and a post-survey, which illuminate how participants' ideas about and confidence in the inclusive teaching strategies have changed. Faculty also complete an action plan where they articulate what plans they have for implementing inclusive teaching strategies in their online course and how they might go about measuring efficacy of what they implement. As mentioned earlier, we've just started receiving some follow-up survey data as well, where faculty report on what they have actually done a few terms later and how it has worked out. Our research participants consented to letting us use these assessments anonymously as we report out. So next, Nadia is going to talk more about our findings to date.
Thank you, Katherine, for providing that overview of the Inclusive Teaching Workshop and the Introduction to a Research Project. One of the aspects that we explore in a research project is the ways in which the instructors who participated in the workshop use inclusive teaching strategies in their practice. To this end, we're gathering some evidence with the follow-up survey. At the end of the workshop, our instructors developed an action plan in which they describe the most useful tools and strategies, as well as their own intentions to put these strategies and tools into action. In the follow-up survey, we asked the instructors to report on what they consider implementing, and what the actual implementation of the inclusive tools and strategies were. Next slide, please. The preliminary results that we share here today come from a group of 26 instructors that responded to a follow-up survey so far. Please bear with us here because the data is still being collected. So this is partial data that we're reporting here. We ask instructors several questions, but two questions in which we plan to gather evidence of the implementation of the inclusive teaching strategies were these two questions. The first one asks, what strategies faculty considered implementing? And these strategies may well be the same strategies that they describe in the action plan or other new ideas that came to their minds. As seen in the left side of the table, the strategies that faculty reported planning included adding a syllabus statement, adopting equitable course policies, creating more transparent prompts for the assignments, adopting techniques to facilitate discussions, and making adjustments to the course curriculum. The second question that we asked was what strategies instructors implemented, like the actual action of implementing those strategies. As we see on the right side of the table, our instructors reported implementing equitable course policies to meet different students' needs, a syllabus statement, changes to the course curriculum, facilitation strategies for discussions to engage all students, and clear assignment prompts and instructions. These preliminary results show that all the intended plans to integrate inclusive strategies and tools were actually implemented in the course in varying degrees. For example, the two strategies that are salient and that resonate when instructors relate to equitable course policies and the syllabus statement. In equitable course policies, it appears that instructors consider flexibility as an important aspect for online students, especially around due dates for assignments or other activities. As for the syllabus statement, it appears that the language and the tone that is used in crafting the statement makes a difference in how students perceive the instructor and whether students could feel comfortable approaching them. Now we're looking at the preliminary findings and establishing connections to the workshop to examine what are the areas that resonate more with our instructors during the workshop and that we see are being implemented in the teaching practices. Equitable policies is clearly one of those areas. As facilitators of the workshop, Katherine and I discussed with instructors the overall characteristics and demographic information of our online student population to help instructors develop more awareness of these students' needs in case the students reach out for help. We also explore with our instructors areas of contextual challenges that can impact students and the ways in which equitable practices can help the students overcome those challenges. During the workshop, we model some of these practices to illustrate that applying some of these tools and practices may benefit all students, not only one particular student. The syllabus statement is another area of interest here. The syllabus being itself a mechanism to communicate the details of the course helps set the tone for the type of the learning environment and the instructor's teaching approach. During our ITO workshop, our instructors discussed personal introductions and the scope of the personal information that they want to share with the students in the course and in the syllabus. The syllabus statement, as we understand here, seems to consolidate the instructor's personal philosophies about the plans for promoting an inclusive learning environment. However, just adding a syllabus statement is not sufficient. We believe that our instructors are becoming more aware of the importance of the tone, the language, and the explicit intentions to create an inclusive learning environment that might make a difference on how students perceive not only the class, but also their instructors and how they can feel comfortable approaching them. For example, a recent study that examined the tone of a syllabus statement found that the tone and the explicit statement on reach out for success can influence whether students seek help or not. But that study was on this specific statement, reaching out for success. And we believe that with the results that we are able to share with you today, it seems that the tone in the syllabus can make a difference on how inclusive an environment can be for a student, how they perceive that. At this point, you may be wondering, well, what are those strategies and how is that we facilitated those for our instructors? So our next set of slides, our colleagues will delve a little bit more into tangible examples from the DPD group of instructors that took the workshop.
Thanks, Nadia. So as Katherine mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, our study evaluates the experiences of two faculty cohorts. The first is all consenting faculty enrolled in the training, and then faculty who teach difference, power, and discrimination courses as part of OSU's general education requirements. We are focusing on the experiences of DPD faculty in particular, because as Katherine mentioned, and you might imagine, facilitating conversations around these sensitive topics in online classrooms adds additional challenges, responsibilities as instructors, and amazing opportunities. So in addition to our roles on the research team, Deanna Lloyd and I both teach difference, power, and discrimination courses online. And we like to take this opportunity to share a few tangible examples from our teaching experience to illustrate how the strategies discussed in the workshop can impact online classrooms. One of the courses I teach on social sustainability focuses on the experiences of minoritized individuals as environmental leaders and on communities facing environmental injustice. I designed an assignment that allows students to collaborate in small groups to create our course content on a multimedia biographical timeline. The assessment facilitates peer-to-peer learning, experiential learning, and offers students a creative way to demonstrate their understanding of the material. In addition to these goals, I worked with an eCampus instructional designer to illustrate themes of institutional bias, privilege, and cognitive bias by simulating institutional discrimination in the assignment design using features available through Canvas. In the assignment, groups of 5 students create profiles of environmental leaders from minoritized communities for the multimedia timeline. The majority of the class is required to submit a photo or video of the people that they profile, but I randomly select one group and provide them a truncated version of the assignment instructions. Students in this group are restricted to text submissions in the assignment settings. At the end of the week, all of the students review the timeline, evaluate the profiles, and nominate their picks for the best contributions for extra credit. The evaluation criteria include how well the profile creatively illustrates the person's work. The following week, I explained that the assessment was designed with built-in inequities, and we have a discussion about the experience as a class. I facilitate the discussion beginning with questions that ask them to reflect on their experiences depending upon their positionality in the assignment. As they reply, I engage frequently in the discussion board, asking follow-up questions to help them unpack the experience further. I also thank them for their candor, as they're often really forthright about the assumptions they made about their peers' work and the impact that the opportunity to reflect on their judgments has had in the broader context of the themes we're discussing in the course. When students in the group that received truncated directions report that they were often self-critical when seeing the quality of their peers' work, they often say that they look back to see if they misread the directions. And I note that so far, no one has ever contacted me after comparing their submissions to their classmates to see if there was a technical error or if it was me that made a mistake. So this exercise includes several elements that are supportive of inclusive pedagogy. It enables me to decenter myself as the instructor and instead center the students' experiences of cognitive bias and internalized oppression, while also drawing attention to the unspoken power dynamics at play in the classroom. After this reflection, students draw parallels between the experience and the course content on institutional discrimination. And I want to share this quote that one of my students reflected. My peers and I had an advantage over the other group with less information. The circumstances of the advantages and disadvantages in this exercise can be related to the circumstances between whites and blacks when institutional bias was carried out using redlining. In our case, it was a chance for a good grade. In terms of redlining, the advantages and disadvantages determine one's opportunity to get a house in a good neighborhood. I was part of a privileged group. I had access to the resources and the instruction to do well on this assignment. Redlining made it so that white people had access to resources such as subsidies, low interest mortgages, guaranteed housing, and opportunities to live in good neighborhoods. On the other side of the spectrum, the group not given the opportunity for extra credit can be related to a degree of what Blacks faced in a redlined housing market. In a sense, my classmates and I experienced to a degree what it was like. This assignment is often a turning point in the course when students really begin to engage with the theory of discrimination and bias with more awareness of the subtleties of how power and privilege play out, even in the context of a classroom setting. Deanna, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Hi, everybody. This is Deanna again, and I teach an online class called Sustainability, Justice, and Engagement. And as Jen mentioned, it is designated as one of those difference, power, and discrimination general ed courses. In the course, we examine social constructs, systems of oppression, and do a lot of self-reflection on our privileges and biases as we explore how frontline communities are engaging in sustainability action. As part of the self-reflection component of the course, I emphasize to students that we are all fallible, but how we react to our mistakes and learn to be better is part of what makes us effective change agents. Recognizing my positionality as the instructor, I could just ask students to be vulnerable and share their reflections, but that keeps all of the power with me. Instead, I too expose my vulnerability and fallibility. I share a video reflecting on 2 different times when I made mistakes with my language around social justice issues, and then how I was called upon to be held accountable for those mistakes. One in a very public way, and one in a more intimate and individual way. And then I disclose my internal feelings as I processed and considered how to respond. It was powerful to see how students engaged and reacted to my vulnerability. As one student noted the last day of class, quote, "Hearing about your experiences felt authentic, supportive, and showed us how it is possible to lead by example. Also, I felt hopeful in that I can learn from my mistakes and continue to grow and evolve," end quote. And although this has been a powerful tool for me, I recognize that my identity as an educated white woman influences how students perceive this expression of vulnerability. So this graphic shows just a few of the different social identities that can influence the positionality of an instructor. Based on their identities, an instructor may experience different risks and benefits to modeling vulnerability in the classroom, such as lower or higher student evaluation scores, more or less pushback from students, or questioning of credibility or bias. Not only has awareness of my positionality helped me critically consider when to be vulnerable in a way that is meaningful to students, doesn't take up too much space, and is relevant to the class, it has also helped me reflect on my course design and curriculum and interrogate whose perspectives are being shared through my materials, what knowledge is being validated, and what narratives are being communicated. I've also been intentional about decentering myself as the expert, similar to Jen, and I strive to design courses that center student knowledge and experience, so I act more as a facilitator rather than a simple conveyor of knowledge. This recognition of positionality is a key aspect of the Inclusive Teaching Online Workshop. As Katherine mentions, in week 1, participants are asked to reflect on their positionality and prompted to consider how much personal information they reveal to students. Some folks answered that they reveal a lot. Some express purposefully hiding aspects of their identity, and others haven't really thought about what personal information or identities are conveyed to students. Personal positionality is one influence on the barriers or opportunities to create an inclusive classroom, but there are others. And we would now like to hear from you all about barriers to implementing inclusive teaching practices in whatever role you're in, as well as what opportunities you have to integrate inclusive strategies. So I'm going to send you back to the Jamboard, please. We'll throw that back in the chat there. Katherine put that there for you all. So if you could head to questions 3 and 4, which are on slides 4 and 5, to engage with these questions about barriers and opportunities and to see what others are sharing. And you are welcome to use multiple sticky notes if you want to share distinct ideas. So we're going to give you a little space to do that, and then we'll do some summarization of that, and then open it up for Q&A. Time. I see time coming up. Yes, can be a challenge. It's meeting all of our expectations about best practices.
I like the example too of just the time it can take and the effort it can take to find some good examples. I think one thing we've really heard through the workshop, and that came out through Jen's example that she shared from her own class as well, that it can be nice to find a colleague, or in her case, she was working with an instructional designer, to kind of have a sounding board for how might we do this, right? There was an end goal in mind, but sometimes figuring out, is it the design of the assignment? Is it the facilitation? Is it a combination of both to reach that end goal of what we're trying to get students to experience or realize for themselves, or have some sort of transformative experience? That takes time, as does finding disciplinary examples of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're increasingly hearing from faculty in the workshop that they're not just willing, but they're interested in digging out examples of skewed data sets, for example, using those with students, talking about them, what are the implications, but just kind of acquainting oneself with what's going on in the discipline, what would be good examples to share with students that you're then prepared to unpack, can be tricky. Nadia, I wonder if you want to speak to, because this has come up in our workshop as well, thanks to somebody who posted, instructors resist because they think it's hand-holding. We've heard some of this concern as well, and concerns specifically about rigor in academic courses. Do you want to unpack that one a little more, Nadia?
Absolutely. Some of the comments that I see coming into the question 3 are basically some relate closely to what we hear from our faculty as well. When having a student submit an assignment later for reasons that are out of control of the student, how does that impact the quality of the course or the rigor of the activity? So we have heard all these concerns that are very valid, but we also need to consider that life happens. And these are the conversations that we try to engage our instructors to devise different activities and different approaches to welcome the students. I think that I have also seen other comments in our discussions in terms of how do I respond to students? I don't know exactly what to say, how to respond. Maybe I will say the wrong thing. And that clearly reflects how vulnerable we are all in addressing difficult conversation with the students. And as Diana was sharing today, I think that acknowledging that vulnerability in the first place is important, and being sure that we embrace that as a positive aspect, because that will also allow the instructors to grow. And we have quite several of the same comments in our discussions.
Definitely. And even with respect to faculty, right? So much of this is about students, about building relationships with students, centering them and their ideas and experiences. But what the approach we try to take in the workshop too is to be careful of faculty, right? Because faculty need to do self-care. They also need to be aware and sometimes protect themselves if they're in a vulnerable position at their institution, for example. So one thing that we really try to emphasize in the workshop is that there isn't one right answer or one set of right answers when it comes to inclusive teaching in an online environment. There's lots of different ways. Some might be a little bit more effective, some maybe less so. We try to work toward those more effective evidence-based ones, but with a lot of sensitivity to that instructor's own level of comfort in teaching online, their kind of positionality with the institution, their identities. There are certainly examples where our faculty feel very vulnerable because they hold marginalized identities themselves. And so they're concerned about how their students will perceive them if they share too much about themselves, for example. But some really great ideas coming out here in terms of things that hopefully kind of as a community, because I know lots of folks here that are regional school colleagues and other universities nearby, that we could perhaps work on kind of together, because this is a conversation certainly worth having.
Yes, Katherine, thank you to Rufina for the question, which is very valid as well. And we have seen these kind of questions and concerns from our faculty during the workshop about some students taking advantage of those equitable practices, flexible deadlines to get ahead of the game and maybe get away with, an assignment, having more time to complete, when there really isn't a real justification there. In the workshop, what we try to do with our faculty is to raise that awareness that the policies have to be very explicit, the requirements, and the ways that the students need to approach the instructors, rather than all the assignments are flexible and everybody can have second opportunities, many opportunities. It's more about transmitting the message to students that the instructor is there to help and support, and there are resources available for our students as well, in a way that students also understand that they have some kind of responsibility towards the instructor in the course as well. And yeah, when we talk about different things that happens in our life, we are aware that we want to be open and understanding about those, but at the same time, it's very worrying that some students might take advantage of that.
I just want to jump in here too and say that this is one of those examples of when it's useful to not just adopt a policy for one student, but that if you make the policy sort of universal in your course, like it avoids these kinds of situations, and you can, provide that support in a more universal way. And just a specific example, like during the pandemic, sort of recognizing that, particularly with online learners, we have a lot of folks that are juggling careers, juggling family, with schools out. And so I've adopted a sort of universal late work policy that's more generous than it is under normal circumstances. And so I'm not requiring students to approach me one-on-one unless they need more time than the more lenient policy, but it just opens up an opportunity just to respect and acknowledge that we're all kind of undergoing unusual circumstances. And it speaks to that idea of when you adopt more inclusive policies that might help one or two students that you know of directly, it creates a culture in the classroom that can help a wider swath of students than you might initially imagine.
That's a great segue maybe into the second question on the Jamboard, Jen, because there's lots of great opportunities for how to do this work in roles and within spheres of influence that folks already have at their institution. One that just caught my eye is being open with students that I'm trying and open to new ideas that they have. This is something that we also increasingly are hearing from faculty toward the end of the inclusive teaching workshop, is to just create those feedback loops that are outside of student evaluations of teaching or course evaluations or whatever your institution calls them, but are a much more kind of informal way to gather ideas and feedback from students, whether that be a midterm survey that just asks students how things are going and gives you a chance to pivot before it's too late. You've reached the end of the term already. End of term surveys. We've had faculty want to try things out and then actually ask students about what their experience was like, whether it be a course activity or a particular strategy they used. You can get some great information there. Or it could be kind of an anonymous Dropbox of a little form that's open all term where students could put in ideas of, here's another author whose voice maybe isn't represented in the course materials, but one I found to be particularly compelling or persuasive. Those kinds of strategies can really help students perceive your openness and benefit from it. And you learn what you can do perhaps in future iterations of your course to improve it further to be inclusive. So what a great opportunity and a great kind of set of strategies that comment is gesturing toward.
I would love to highlight too that the opportunities, I love seeing all the different levels that they're at. And I mean, this speaks to, there's different roles in the room here, but there's some of those individual ones about, personal developments and research, learning, book clubs. And then it kind of goes up to those course designs. It's thinking about frameworks for design and facilitating discussions, and then going on up to administrators supporting inclusive practices being integrated into the classrooms, and also integrating it into your PD, which I really love as well. It just brings that institutional acknowledgement. And I know that can be a barrier for some folks as well. So kind of thinking just about the different scales even within that we all have influence within.
Wonderful. Do we maybe want to transition to Q&A? I think we've had, one question in the chat so far, but if you have other questions about the workshop, about our research, about types of strategies that we're recommending in terms of kind of more nuanced or in the weeds ones, more specific ones that we've talked about today, we're happy to take questions now. I think folks can also unmute too. So if you'd rather just voice your question, please, by all means.
A lot of times, if you hit the space bar, you will unmute temporarily, so you don't have to worry about taking yourself off mute and putting it back on.
Okay, Anne asked, what do you think was the most impactful practice for faculty to learn about for facilitating online discussions? Nadia, do you want to take that one? I can do it with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katherine. Well, one of the strategies that we discussed with our faculty in the workshop is, number one, not to take any negative comment from students so personally. I know that we have heard lots of things about it's not personal, but it's more about taking a step back and thinking where this is coming from, what might have triggered this, giving the student the benefit of the doubt for some time until, as instructors, you're ready to craft a response where, number one, you acknowledge that the student is contributing to the discussion, but there's some work that needs to be done there. So the idea is not to treat the student with the idea that they are intentionally doing something wrong, but maybe they need some more guidance. So helping the students to grow also in their own learning processes. Using more supportive language and providing the students with a direction of where and how they can be better at posting their responses, responding to other classmates, all with respect. So in that sense, that's what we try to encourage the instructors to think about as the strategies and the steps that they can use and not jumping directly. We know that there are certain circumstances in which the discussions are very negative, and there's when instructor need to take a different approach and maybe talk with the student on an individual basis, and also plan a strategy to address the issue with the rest of the students in the discussion.
And just to piggyback off of that, Nadia, I think one thing faculty have come to find out for themselves when we do a little scenario activity in the workshop, we have an example that was based on something that happened in a real eCampus course. We've tweaked it so it's fully anonymized for that student from years ago, but it's a pretty problematic post, and faculty grapple with in that moment, how do I respond to this? And the scenario is, you've maybe intended to check in every single day on a discussion, but maybe a couple of days have gone by. This is an asynchronous course, so other students in the class would have seen the post by now. What happens if students have posted and gotten angry at a student, or nobody's posted, and that tells you something about what's going on in terms of the tone of that discussion, right? And through that, faculty have to kind of develop their own set of strategies within this framework we present them. But one piece that they come back to is, this is very useful and practical for lots of kinds of student situations, whether it be in emails, on a discussion board, et cetera, is how to demonstrate to online students that you've listened to them. Because in person, when you're face to face with a student, there's a lot of body language that demonstrates that. But in an online environment, how do we communicate that? Largely through the medium of text. That's tricky. And that's kind of a stylistic thing that every faculty member has to figure out for themselves, but to sort of, whether they agree with whatever was said or not, to demonstrate listening, start developing that kind of empathetic bridge before they can move on to what's next, to resolve it, to answer the question, whatever it is. And I think it's gotten at just a larger kind of set of strategies of what does it mean to help our online students really feel seen and heard on a fairly individual basis. And what does that look like in a small class? What does that look like in a large enrollment class where there's maybe multiple faculty and multiple teaching assistants? But still, there's opportunities to help students feel seen and heard so they feel like they belong. So, and hopefully that helps to answer your question.
Yeah, I can give just an example that just happened yesterday. So I'm getting started with spring term here. We're on the quarter system, and the beginning of the class is just foundations about kind of systemic oppression and these systems. And one of the students was pretty resistant to the idea that systemic racism was a reality in the US, and said a lot of things that, contradicted learning materials and were pretty aggressive, but they did say that they thought classism was a big issue. And so I snagged that and was like, oh yes, this is an issue, and like highlighted how that's a form like that plays into systemic oppression, and then wove that into talking about racism and that interconnection, just so that I could be like, okay, a lot of this is kind of off track here, but there is that nugget, and I heard that and I pulled that in to connect back and to highlight, yes, I'm hearing what you're sharing.
And Christine, I just put a kind of a preliminary answer to your question in the chat. Christine had asked what prompted us to develop a whole workshop about inclusive online teaching as opposed to weave it into other things that we do. So one thing I shared as a resource is we just released a set of online teaching principles that are all evidence-based. We're a Quality Matters school, so we have a rubric for course design. We wanted some principles to really get at these facilitation strategies, especially for folks who didn't have a chance to design their online course. And one principle that you'll see on there is around inclusive teaching. And so we have different workshops, like preliminary new instructor training for eCampus covers all the principles. So everybody gets a little bit of a taste of each one and strategies to use. But inclusivity was one where we really felt like a deep dive was going to be important. And in fact, we had faculty, departments, colleges asking for this for a while, and we couldn't find anything in terms of let's send folks to a workshop. There hasn't been one specifically about asynchronous online courses for credit courses. So we developed our own. So that was kind of the needs assessment process there. For folks that came in after I stuck this in the chat at the very beginning, we have a copy of our slides that you're more than welcome to link and take a look at further. And that has the kind of high level description of how the modules are organized and what we cover in them. Okay.
Christine, is this the slide you were looking for?
I think that was probably the one. Yeah, that's the most, I think, detailed one of the outline. Okay, I think we're just approaching time. Any last burning questions? We'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to reach out to one or all of us if you have questions after the fact. This is an area we're very interested in, and we have a lot of research yet to do, so it will be an ongoing conversation. Okay, well, thank you all. It's been great to interact with you today, and hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon and evening.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Looks like people just wanted to leave quickly. It's 5 o'clock in Colorado.
That is true. Well, thanks again, Eric, for facilitating.
Thank you. It was a good presentation. You know, good information to bring along. So
Great. All
Thanks
right.
very
Much. Thank you.
thank you,
Take care,
everyone.
everybody. Bye.
Have a good day.
Okay.
We'll see you tomorrow in
Bye-bye.
sessions.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.